Welcome back to the shop, my friends. Steve here at SKS Props, and this is part 3 in my Oblivion chest armor build series. In this video, we're going to be talking all about textures and paint. Now, when it comes to Oblivion armor, because the game did come out over 20 years ago, a lot of the armor in the series has a lot of texture on it. It is not completely smooth, and I feel a lot of that has to do with the fact that you needed the textures for those old school graphics. But it transfers fantastic into the remastered version and into a cosplay like this. I wanted the armor to look like iron, but to make it really look heavy. But it's all made out of foam, so it's extremely lightweight. Can you imagine what this would weigh if it was made out of a 3D print? This is why foam is great application for these types of projects. That doesn't mean that you have to use it for everything. You could have a 3D printed helmet or a weapon, but foam is king when it comes to this kind of stuff. Now, before I jump into the build, one thing that's been on my mind quite a bit recently is that I am getting older. I know I don't look it, and that's great. But as some of you know, I was diagnosed with extremely high blood pressure several years ago, and I've been trying to do better at that. It is down, and I've been trying to take better care of myself, and one way to do that is to exercise, and especially to walk. And so I'm proud to have YesSoul as the sponsor of today's video. The YesSoul TM1 treadmill offers a lot of the same features and performances as higher priced models. And honestly, I've been using this for a while now, and I'm really happy with its performance. The thing I like is that it was easy to assemble, and there's not a lot of gadgets on it. It's fairly simple to use. You pretty much just press play and adjust the speed to what you're comfortable with. Now, what's nice is that it does have a feature that updates you with your miles per hour and how long you've been working out. And it does have an emergency shutoff just in case. But one of its best perks is getting the full function out of its HD screen. It has a free screencasting feature, so you can stream apps like YouTube or Spotify without mandatory subscriptions. And honestly, staying entertained while exercising makes it a lot easier. It does come with a 21-inch full HD display, and it can rotate 360 degrees. And with 6-watt dual speakers attached, it's great for playing music as well. So yeah, you can bring up a game and just feel like you're walking through the environment. But if you want to go that extra step, of course, put on that costume. And in seriousness, this is a good way to test its overall mobility and functionality. Now, I primarily do just walking on the pad, but if you're ever getting ready for battle, slap on some Gears of War and I can jog or sprint. And if you'd like to check it out, they did give me a code for $100 off with SKS100. So, while wearing costumes or without, you can enjoy fun cardio with YesSoul. And when I'm done, it can allow for easy fold design, which is great for tight spaces like the spot next to my laser cutter. Now, let's jump back into the build. Oblivion armor in the game isn't smooth, it has a very unique texture. And I'm going to start that process using some Liquitex ceramic stucco. This is an acrylic polymer with fine-grained organic particles. Since it's an acrylic, when it dries, that means it's going to have a little bit of give, which is going to be great for using on foam. I'll apply the medium with my finger, but then I'll go in with a dry sponge to give it the desired texture. This makes it look a lot more accidental and not near as deliberate. And because it's an acrylic, it's also easy to clean up if you get it on a spot you don't want by using a little bit of water. After this was left to dry for a few hours, I'll then lightly dust the surface using some Valspar stone. Now, this isn't applied thick, more of a filler in between the larger stucco sections. The stone was left to dry overnight, and then both textures could be lightly knocked down with a sanding sponge. From here, parts of the foam were heated up with a heat gun, and then foil was pressed into the surface. Since the other textures were additive, this looks subtractive. And this texture wasn't added everywhere. I was able to step back and look at larger open areas on the armor. These are the spots that I add the textured embossing. Another trick for adding texture to this armor was by adding some 3M 74 foam fast, as well as some Flex Seal. The 74 is sprayed on and then dabbed with a cloth. After it had dried and become tacky, the Flex Seal could be added. But the cool thing is, after it dries for a bit, it can be manipulated with heat. So I'll go in and heat up the adhesive and then tap it with a paper towel. In the end, this just adds to more unique looks. This was also knocked down with a sanding sponge after being left to dry for a few hours. Before this is sealed, I did go in with a stone bit on my rotary tool and gave it a little bit of battle damage. To seal the foam, I'm using Plastidip, and because I have a ton of texture going on, I decided to do 3 full layers. That way the Plastidip is doing a complete coating and softening some of those details. Before I spray on any additional colors, I go ahead and mask off the quote-unquote leather bits using some frog tape. Now, frog tape can be kind of sticky. So before I adhere it, I do stick it to the surface of my table first. That will help get rid of some of the tackiness. For the base colors on this armor, I'm first going to do a dusting of Rust-Oleum Soft Iron. After that had cured for a while, I'll then dust on a light layer of Rust-Oleum Flat Antique Nickel. This two-color approach works great because it gives me both mid and high tones. But I do need to make the iron look warmer, and to do that I'm going to add a wash of Liquitex Raw Sienna and Burnt Sienna. These colors are going to be mixed together with a little bit of Mars Black added in. Then this acrylic mixture is going to be brushed onto the surface using a lot of water and a 1-inch mop brush. Any additional pigments that need to be pulled away can be done so with a damp paper towel. And as you can see, what it's doing is slightly tinting the surface, giving it a little bit of rusty goodness down into the details. The thing I love about Oblivion is that the armor, depending on where you're at in the game, can actually be different. If you're in one of the cities, it's very bright and polished, but you can see the exact same armor on someone else in a war-torn area and it's dark and rusty. For mine, I'm going to be going for an in-between. Not completely battle-worn, but not pristine either. For that metallic look, some graphite powder is going to be applied to the surface using a shop towel. Now if you've never used graphite powder before, be sure to have some protective material down because this stuff does get everywhere, but it also does a great job adding a true rich metallic to this build. And here you can see it's not covering everything. The iron that we added in the beginning is still there, as well as the rusty colors that we added in earlier. Each of these subsequent layers add up to the overall look. Now here's where I've changed a little bit. Instead of using a shop towel to buff the surface, I've started to use a dry sponge. And this works so much better, especially with all of the texture that this surface has. It easily would have worn its way through a shop towel in no time. But the sponge is able to hold its shape, buff the surface, and remove any excess graphite. And the great thing is I can just wash it out when I'm done. Now it's time to work on the leather straps, and I'm going to start by applying the burnt and raw sienna mixture from earlier, but this time around I'm not going to add as much water and leave the pigments a little more opaque. And notice I'm not painting it all over, I'm still allowing some of that black to show through. While I allow the straps to dry, let's add some highlights to the armor. For this process, I'm going to be using some Liquitex Iridescent Rich Silver and Bright Silver. Both of these pigments are going to be eventually dry brushed onto the surface using a 1-inch mop brush, but this time no water. Now the important thing here is I'm trying to pick out the highest areas on the armor. Those areas that are going to receive more abrasive wear, therefore going to be brighter. And for this particular armor, it's easier to find an edge or seam detail and then work my way in. Same principle applies to the pauldrons. The metal is going to be scraped more along the outside edge and in the middle of each quadrant. So I also go in and mix it up and not just do dry brushing, but also some stippling. And the thing that's cool is that all these little taps and brush strokes look very authentic when the light hits them. And of course, I can't forget the tiny rivets on the straps. On the front, I did go in with some bright silver and highlight some additional areas on the top of the breastplate. Switching over to a filbert brush, more of the Liquitex Bright Silver can be used to pick up the highest sheen areas. These are going to be areas that I specifically want the eye to be drawn to. Small details like the rivets or the layered area down at the bottom. And here you can see it's starting to pick up colors from around my shop, so that means it's a fantastic shine. Some more of the raw sienna and burnt sienna are going to be mixed together, this time with pretty much no water. This is going to be a highlight layer for the leather parts, and it's going to be dry brushed over the surface. This is where the tinfoil embossing I did on the early steps really starts to pay off. The dark layers still stay in the recesses, but these high points really start to get a bump from these colors. So I would dry brush this specifically on parts of the leather that would receive more wear and tear. And because I'm staying within the same color values for the entire piece, it all looks as one. So hopefully you'll enjoy this tutorial and you can utilize some of these tips and tricks to make your props look like heavy rusted metal. And the fantastic thing is you don't necessarily have to be making this particular project. You can utilize these techniques for a lot of different scenarios. And if you are building any of my builds or utilizing some HD foam, be sure to tag me at SKS Props on Twitter and Instagram because I love seeing your creations. Until next time, build your best with the best HD foam.